At brunch, my daughter-in-law said, "You'll just ruin the holiday like always." I didn't argue. I simply stopped paying the property taxes. On Christmas Eve, they opened the foreclosure notice, without me. I still remember how the restaurant fell silent after Rebecca's words. The clinking of silverware ceased. Conversations at nearby tables seemed to halt mid-sentence. And my heart, my poor, tired heart, stopped for what felt like an eternity. "Excuse me?" I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Rebecca rolled her eyes, that dismissive gesture I'd grown accustomed to over the last 7 years. "Oh, Martha, don't act surprised. Every Christmas, something goes wrong when you're involved. Last year, you brought the wrong dessert. The year before, you were late because of that ridiculous volunteer thing. That ridiculous volunteer thing was me delivering meals to homebound seniors, people who had no one to care for them during the holidays. But I didn't mention that. I never did. I looked at my son Peter, waiting for him to say something, anything, to defend me. He kept his eyes fixed on the menu, his knuckles white from gripping it too hard. The silence from him hurt more than Rebecca's words ever could. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. We're thinking, Rebecca continued, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. Maybe this year you could just come for Christmas dinner. Not the whole day. That way, there's less chance of complications. My grandson Ethan, 13 and perpetually attached to his phone, glanced up briefly. I caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Embarrassment, perhaps even a hint of indignation, on my behalf, before Rebecca placed a hand on his shoulder and he returned to his screen. "I see," I said, folding my napkin carefully and placing it beside my half-eaten eggs Benedict. "Well, if that's what you think is best." "Mom," Peter finally spoke, still not meeting my eyes. "It's not that we don't want you there. It's just, Christmas is stressful enough. Stressful enough without me," he meant. 70 years old, and I had become an inconvenience to my own son. "Of course," I nodded, reaching for my purse. "I understand completely." I didn't understand how I had gone from being the center of my son's world to someone who complicated holidays. I didn't understand when Rebecca's opinions had become more important than 4 decades of Christmas mornings where I had been the one making magic happen. I certainly didn't understand when I had transformed from mom to Martha in the narrative of my own family. "Are you leaving?" Peter asked, finally looking up, mild surprise on his face. "I have some errands to run," I lied, standing up. "I'll take care of my portion of the bill at the front." "Don't be dramatic, Martha," Rebecca sighed. "We're just trying to make Christmas perfect for Ethan. You want that too, don't you?" I looked at my grandson, the only person in this family, who still seemed to have a genuine smile for me when no one was watching. "More than anything," I said honestly. "Ethan, I'll see you soon, sweetheart." As I walked away, I heard Rebecca's voice, not quite low enough. "See what I mean? Everything becomes a whole production with her." Outside, the November air bit at my cheeks, or perhaps it was the tears I hadn't realized were falling. I sat in my 10-year-old Buick, the car I'd kept instead of buying a new one so I could help Peter and Rebecca with the down payment on their house. The house where I was now only welcome for portions of holidays, carefully timed to minimize my disruptive presence. I started the car but didn't drive immediately. Instead, I opened the glove compartment and pulled out the property tax bill that had arrived yesterday. The bill for the house my son and his wife lived in, the house I had been quietly paying taxes on for the past 5 years, ever since Peter lost his job and they struggled to make ends meet. It was supposed to be temporary, just until they got back on their feet. Peter had a good job now. Rebecca had started her interior design business. They took vacations to Cabo and bought Ethan the latest electronics. Yet somehow, the arrangement of me paying the property taxes had never been revisited. My finger traced over the amount due, $6,879.43, nearly $7,000 that I would pull from my modest retirement savings, just as I had done every year. $7,000 from a woman who apparently couldn't even be trusted to attend a full Christmas celebration without ruining it. Something shifted inside me as I sat there, a tectonic movement in my soul. It wasn't anger, though. Perhaps it should have been. It was clarity. Crystal painful clarity. For 7 years, I had been the invisible support beam holding up their life, bending and accommodating until I had nearly disappeared. I had sold my own house after Henry died, giving Peter and Rebecca the money for their down payment with the understanding that I would always have a place with them. That place had gradually shrunk from the in-law suite to Mom's room, to what was now essentially a glorified guest room that stored some of my belongings. I put the bill back in the glove compartment without making my usual note to send the check. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't immediately work out which part of my budget would need to be adjusted to cover it. My phone buzzed with a text from Peter. "Where did you go?" We weren't finished discussing Christmas. Yes, we were. In fact, I realized as I finally pulled away from the curb, we were finished discussing much more than that. I had spent my entire adult life making sure my family had everything they needed, even after Henry's death left me to raise Peter alone. I had worked 2 jobs to put him through college. I had postponed my own retirement to help pay for his wedding. I had emptied my savings to help them buy their dream home. And today, in return, I had been told I was a complication, a disruption, a ruiner of holidays. The property tax bill would come due in January. For the first time, I would not be paying. This wasn't about revenge. This was about finally recognizing my own worth. This was about understanding that love shouldn't cost you your dignity. I drove to my friend Judith's house instead of going home to my small apartment. I needed to talk to someone who still saw me as a whole person, not just an inconvenient obligation. "Martha, what happened?" Judith asked as soon as she opened the door and saw my face. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. I think I just realized I've been invisible for a very long time. And as I sat in Judith's warm kitchen, explaining what had happened at brunch, I felt something unexpected begin to bloom inside me. It wasn't just clarity anymore. It was liberation. 2 days after the brunch incident, I stood in what was once called my room in Peter and Rebecca's house. I had come while they were at work, and Ethan was at school, using the key they didn't know I still had. Not to snoop. I would never, but to gather some of the photo albums I'd stored in the closet. As I pulled out the worn leather album from the top shelf, a handwritten note fluttered to the floor. I recognized Henry's handwriting immediately. My fingers trembled as I picked it up, memories flooding back. "Martha, I know things are tight with Peter's college tuition, but I want you to use this bonus to take that painting class you've been eyeing. You've put everyone else first for too long. Your loving Henry." I had never taken that class. Henry's unexpected bonus had gone toward Peter's textbooks instead. Henry never complained. He understood. He always did. I sat on the edge of the bed, a bed that had once been in the master bedroom but had been relocated here after Rebecca decided it didn't match their aesthetic, and opened the photo album. There I was, 30 years younger, standing proudly next to Peter at his high school. Graduation. My hair was still brown then, not the silver it had become, and my smile reached my eyes. Henry had his arm around both of us, his face beaming with pride. We had scraped together every penny to make sure Peter could attend the college of his choice. "We're investing in his future," Henry had said. I turned the page. Peter's college graduation. Just me standing beside him this time. Henry had been gone 2 years by then, his heart giving out suddenly one ordinary Tuesday. I had sold Henry's beloved fishing boat and taken on evening shifts at the pharmacy to ensure Peter could finish his degree without loans. When I came to the photos of Peter and Rebecca's wedding, my chest tightened. There I was, in the pale blue dress I'd saved for months to buy, standing at the edge of the family photos, already being eased toward the periphery. Rebecca's parents dominated the center, their financial contribution to the lavish wedding, buying them prominence. I had contributed too, liquidating half my retirement fund to help pay for the venue Rebecca insisted on, but that wasn't visible in the photographs. I closed the album and pulled out a folder of documents I kept behind. Inside was the original agreement from when I sold my house. $175,000 transferred to Peter and Rebecca for the down payment on this house, with the understanding that the in-law suite would be my home for as long as I needed it. The in-law suite that had gradually transformed into a storage room with a bed. There was also a stack of property tax receipts, meticulously organized by year. 5 years of payments, nearly $35,000 that had quietly flowed from my account to keep this roof over their heads. "It's just until I get back on my feet, Mom," Peter had said when he lost his job during the recession. That was 7 years ago. He'd found new employment within 2 years, better employment, with a corner office and a company car, but somehow the tax arrangement had never been discussed again. I had enabled this, I realized. My silence had been interpreted as acceptance. My generosity had morphed into expectation. With a deep breath, I gathered the albums and documents, placing them carefully in the tote bag I'd brought. As I did, my gaze fell on a framed photo on the nightstand, one I hadn't seen before. It showed Ethan and me at the science fair last spring, both of us grinning widely after his project won first place. I had helped him with it while Peter and Rebecca were on a weekend getaway. Ethan must have placed the photo here, in what was supposedly my room. My heart swelled and ached simultaneously. At least someone in this house valued my presence. I replaced everything exactly as I had found it, except for what I had come to collect. As I was about to leave, I noticed Rebecca's design magazine open on the kitchen counter. A bright red circle marked a $4,000 chandelier for the dining room, with a note in the margin. Christmas gift from Peter? My jaw tightened. They couldn't afford to take over their own property taxes, but a $4,000 chandelier was on the wish list. That evening, I called Judith. We had been friends for over 40 years, ever since we were young mothers comparing notes on diaper brands. She had watched me raise Peter, had held my hand at Henry's funeral, had helped me pack up my house when I sold it to support Peter, and Rebecca. If anyone would understand, it was Judith. "They're taking advantage of you, Martha," she said after I explained everything. "They have been for years." "I let them," I admitted. "I wanted to help." "There's a difference between helping and being used." Judith's voice was gentle but firm. "What does your financial advisor say about all this?" I hesitated. "I haven't exactly consulted him about the property tax payments." "Martha, I know. It's Peter, my son. Who sat there while his wife told you that you ruin holidays?" Judith reminded me. "The same son who hasn't noticed that his mother is draining her retirement savings to pay his taxes while he takes vacations to Cabo." Put that way, it sounded worse than I had allowed myself to admit. "What are you going to do?" Judith asked. I looked at the property tax bill sitting on my kitchen table. "I'm not paying it this time," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "I've decided that much." "Good," Judith said firmly. "And then what?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "I don't want to confront them. That would just create more drama, and Rebecca would somehow twist it around to make me the villain. So don't confront them," Judith suggested. "Just stop giving, stop sacrificing, stop being available whenever they deign to include you." A weight seemed to lift from my shoulders at her words. I didn't have to make a grand declaration or have a dramatic confrontation. I could simply stop paying their taxes, stop accepting last-minute invitations when someone else canceled, stop being the emergency babysitter who never said no, stop pretending it didn't hurt when Rebecca talked over me or Peter didn't defend me. "I'm thinking of taking that painting class," I said suddenly. "What painting class?" "The one at the community center. The one Henry wanted me to take 30 years ago." Judith was quiet for a moment. "Martha Jenkins," she finally said. "I think that's the best idea you've had in years." After we hung up, I sat at my small kitchen table and made a list of all the monthly expenses I paid that weren't for me. The property taxes, Ethan's science camp tuition, the family's cell phone plan that I had somehow never been removed from. The subscription services I barely used but kept because Peter and Rebecca occasionally logged in with my account. It was a longer list than I had expected, and it totaled nearly $1,200 per month, a significant portion of my fixed income. Next, I made another list. Painting classes, a weekend trip to the coast, new walking shoes, books I wanted to read, friends I wanted to visit. For the first time in decades, I was planning for myself, not around others. The sensation was foreign, almost uncomfortable, like stretching a muscle long unused. But as I looked at both lists side by side, I knew which future I wanted to build. I picked up my phone, hesitated, then put it down again. No, I wouldn't call Peter to explain. I wouldn't justify or defend my decision. I would simply stop being the invisible support beam in a house where I was no longer welcome. The first test of my newfound resolve came just 3 days later when my phone lit up with Rebecca's name. I stared at it, my finger hovering over the screen. In the past, I would have answered immediately, regardless of what I was doing. This time, I let it ring. A voicemail followed almost instantly. "Martha, it's Rebecca. I need you to pick up Ethan from school today. I have a client meeting and Peter's stuck at the office. Call me back right away." Not a request, a demand. No. Please, or if you're available, or I know it's last minute. Just an expectation that I would rearrange my day because Rebecca had something more important to do. I checked the time. It was 1:30 p.m., and Ethan would need to be picked up at 3:15. Rebecca had clearly known about this conflict earlier, but had waited until the last minute to call me, probably after exhausting other options she found more appealing. In the past, I would have called back immediately, canceled my plans, and hurried to be there for Ethan. Today, I placed my phone back in my purse and continued walking toward the community center where I had signed up for my first painting class. My phone buzzed again as I reached the entrance. This time, it was Peter. "Mom, did you get Rebecca's message? We need you to get Ethan." I took a deep breath. "I have plans today, Peter. I'm sorry." A pause. "Plans? What plans?" The surprise in his voice stung. The idea that I might have my own life seemed to genuinely baffle him. "I've signed up for a painting class. It starts in 10 minutes. "A painting class?" He sounded incredulous. "Mom, this is important. Rebecca has a meeting with potential clients, and I'm presenting to the executive team. Can't you reschedule?" "No, Peter, I can't. The class has been paid for, and it's the first session." My voice was calm but firm. "I'm sure there are other options. What about Rebecca's parents? They're in Phoenix until next week." "Mom, come on. It's Ethan." He knew exactly which button to push. I adored my grandson. For a moment, I wavered. "Why not call a rideshare service?" "I'm happy to pay for it," I suggested. "You want us to put Ethan in a car with a stranger?" Peter's voice rose. "Or he could take the bus. Many children do. Or call one of his friend's parents." I pushed open the door to the community center. "I have to go, Peter. My class is starting." "Mom, I love you, but I have to go. Figure it out." I ended the call and turned off my phone. My hands were shaking as I walked into the classroom. I had never said no to them before, not like this. A mixture of guilt and exhilaration swirled inside me as I took my seat at an easel. "First time?" asked an older gentleman setting up beside me. "Is it that obvious?" I managed a small smile. "Only because you look like you've just jumped out of an airplane," he chuckled. "I'm Walter." "Martha," I replied, setting up my borrowed supplies. And yes, it feels a bit like I've jumped without a parachute. For the next 2 hours, I lost myself in learning about brush techniques and color theory. I created nothing remarkable, just a simple still life of apples that looked somewhat lopsided, but I felt a sense of accomplishment I hadn't experienced in years. When I turned my phone back on after class, I had 7 missed calls and a flurry of text messages. Apparently, Peter had eventually called Ethan's friend's mother, who had been put out but had agreed to help. Rebecca was beyond frustrated with me. Ethan was confused and upset that I hadn't come. The guilt threatened to overwhelm me until I saw the last message from Peter. "We need to have a serious talk about your responsibilities to this family." My responsibilities. Not theirs to me, but mine to them. I put the phone away without responding and signed up for the full 8-week painting course. When I arrived home, there was a missed delivery notice on my apartment door. I had been expecting art supplies I'd ordered online, my first non-essential purchase in longer than I could remember. I'd have to pick them up tomorrow. I made myself a cup of tea and sat down with the folder of financial documents I'd retrieved from Peter and Rebecca's house. With a clearer mind, I began to calculate exactly how much I had contributed to their household over the years. The numbers were staggering. Down payment, $175,000 property taxes, $30 for the $397 over 5 years, Ethan's extracurricular activities, approximately $12,000 various household expenses I'd covered, at least $20,000, nearly $250,000, money that could have funded a comfortable retirement for myself. Instead, I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment, carefully budgeting my Social Security checks. The next morning, I called my financial advisor, Martin, and scheduled an appointment. "Martha," he greeted me warmly when I arrived at his office. "It's been too long. How are you?" "I'm reassessing some things," I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "I need to make sure I'm being smart about my future." Martin nodded approvingly. "That's always wise. What prompted this review?" I hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I've been supporting my son and his family financially for years. More than I should have. I need to stop and make sure I haven't compromised my own security." To Martin's credit, he didn't lecture me. He simply asked for details, then ran the numbers. "The good news," he said after reviewing everything, "is that you're not in terrible shape. The bad news is that you've definitely been overextending yourself. These property tax payments in particular are unsustainable given your fixed income." "I've decided to stop paying them," I told him. "Good," he said firmly. "And the sooner you disentangle yourself from these other expenses, the better. We spent the next hour creating a revised budget that focused on my needs, not Peter and Rebecca's. It was simultaneously terrifying and liberating to see the numbers reconfigured to prioritize my own financial health. "What about Ethan?" I asked. "I don't want to cut him off completely." Martin considered this. "Perhaps set aside a specific amount for things you want to do with him, activities, educational expenses, but make sure it's something you can afford, not just what they expect." As I left his office, I felt lighter. There was a plan now. A path forward that didn't involve slowly draining my resources for people who saw me as an inconvenience. My phone rang as I reached my car. "Rebecca again. Martha, finally. Did you forget about Ethan's science project? You promised to help him finish it this weekend." I had promised no such thing. I had mentioned to Ethan that I'd be happy to look over his work if he wanted, but there had been no commitment to a weekend project. "I'm sorry, Rebecca, but I don't recall making that promise." "Well, he needs help, and Peter and I have the charity gala Saturday night. We need you to come over and stay with him." Once again, not a request, a demand. "I'm afraid I have plans this weekend," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "What plans?" The disbelief in her tone was palpable. "Personal ones," I replied, unwilling to justify myself. "But please tell Ethan he can call me if he has questions about his project. I'm happy to help over the phone." "Martha, this is ridiculous. What's going on with you lately?" First the painting class, now personal plans? Ethan needs you. I took a deep breath. I love Ethan very much, and I'm still here for him. But I'm no longer available for last-minute babysitting when it's convenient for you and Peter. I ended the call before she could respond, my heart pounding. Twice in 1 week I had said no. The sky hadn't fallen. The world hadn't ended. I was learning to exist as more than just their safety net. And despite the guilt, it felt right. November slipped into December, and with it came the first real snowfall of the season. I stood by my apartment window watching the flakes drift lazily down, coating the world in pristine white. 2 weeks had passed since I'd started saying no, and the change in my life was as transformative as the snow outside. My refrigerator door now held a schedule, my schedule. Painting class on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Coffee with Judith on Wednesday. Mornings. A book club I'd joined that met every other Friday. A walking group on Saturday mornings, regardless of weather. Small commitments that formed the scaffolding of a life I was building for myself. My phone chimed with a text from Ethan. "Grandma, can you help me with my science project tomorrow? Mom and Dad are going to some party." This was new. Usually, Peter or Rebecca made these requests, or rather demands, on Ethan's behalf. The fact that he was reaching out directly warmed my heart. But tomorrow was Saturday, walking group day. I typed carefully, "I have plans in the morning until 11. I could come by after that for a couple of hours if that works for you." His response was immediate. "That would be awesome. Thanks, Grandma." I smiled at his enthusiasm. Setting boundaries didn't mean cutting off my grandson. It just meant finding a balance that respected my needs too. Another text followed, this one from Peter. "Mom, Rebecca says you're coming tomorrow to help Ethan. Does that mean you can watch him all evening too? Our event runs late." I took a deep breath before responding. "I told Ethan I could help with his project from 11:01. I have other plans for the evening." Peter's reply was swift and tinged with frustration. "What other plans? This is important, Mom." The old Martha would have canceled her plans immediately. The new Martha typed, "I'm having dinner with friends from my painting class. We've had it planned for a week. Since when do you have friends from a painting class?" The disbelief in his text was almost palpable. I didn't respond. I didn't need to justify my social life to my son. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. "Peter." "Mom," he started without preamble. "What's going on with you lately? First the painting class, now dinner with strangers. Rebecca thinks you're going through some kind of phase." "A phase?" I couldn't help but laugh. "I'm 70 years old, Peter. I think I'm a bit old for phases. You know what I mean. You've been different. Less available. Less available." As if my primary purpose was to be available to them. "I've made some changes," I acknowledged. "I'm focusing more on my own interests these days." Is this about what Rebecca said at brunch? About Christmas? Because she didn't mean anything by it. You know how she gets when she's planning events. "This isn't about Rebecca," I said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. "It's about me finally taking care of myself for a change." A long pause followed. "Do you need money, Mom? Is that what this is about?" The question stunned me. Money? Why would you think that? Well, you're suddenly concerned about taking care of yourself, scheduling all these activities. I thought maybe you were worried about finances. I nearly laughed at the irony. For years, I had quietly funneled my money into supporting their lifestyle, and now he thought my independence was motivated by financial troubles. I'm not concerned about money, I said carefully. But speaking of finances, you should know that I won't be paying the property taxes this year. The silence that followed was deafening. What do you mean? Peter finally asked, his voice tight. Exactly what I said. I've paid them for 5 years, Peter. It's time for you to take over that responsibility. Mom, we're counting on that. We've budgeted with that in mind. Now I did laugh, though there was no humor in it. You budgeted to spend my money without ever discussing it with me? That's not fair. It's been the arrangement for years. You can't just change it without warning. I'm giving you warning now, I said calmly. The bill is due in January. This is about Rebecca, isn't it? You're punishing us because of what she said. No, Peter. This is about me making better financial decisions for myself. I've supported you and your family generously for years. I'm not stopping because I'm angry. I'm stopping because it's time. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. We'll have to talk about this later. I have a meeting. Of course, I said. Tomorrow at 11, I'll be there to help Ethan with his project. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, staring at the snow. A part of me felt guilty, the ingrained, maternal instinct to sacrifice for my child. But a stronger part felt vindicated. For too long, I had been the only one giving in this relationship. The next morning, I joined my walking group despite the cold. 6 of us, all women over 60, trudged through the snowy park, our breath-forming clouds in the crisp air. We talked about books, politics, health concerns, normal topics that had nothing to do with being someone's mother or grandmother. It felt wonderful to be seen as just Martha, not as an extension of someone else's needs. Walter was there too, the gentleman, from my painting class who had now become a regular part of our Saturday walks. He had a dry wit that made me laugh and a gentle way of drawing me into conversations when I grew quiet. You seem lighter today, he observed as we lagged slightly behind the others. Do I? Last week you kept checking your phone every 5 minutes. Today it stayed in your pocket. I hadn't realized he'd noticed. I had a difficult conversation with my son yesterday. Set some boundaries that were long overdue. Walter nodded. My daughter didn't speak to me for 6 months after I refused to fund her 3rd career change. Now we have the best relationship we've had in years. 6 months sounds difficult. It was, he admitted. But sometimes you have to let them flounder a bit to find their own way. After the walk, I drove to Peter and Rebecca's house, arriving precisely at 11 as promised. Rebecca answered the door, her smile thin and forced. Martha, how nice of you to fit us into your busy social calendar. I chose to ignore the barb. Hello, Rebecca. Is Ethan ready to work on his project? He's in the dining room, she said, stepping aside. Peter and I will be leaving at 5. We've hired a sitter since you're unavailable. Again, I let the comment pass. I found Ethan surrounded by poster boards and a half-constructed model of what appeared to be a wind turbine. Grandma, his face lit up. I'm doing my project on renewable energy. Can you help me make the turbine spin? For the next 2 hours, I focused entirely on Ethan, helping him troubleshoot his design and offering suggestions for his presentation. Peter and Rebecca moved around the periphery, Rebecca making pointed comments about how some people always have time for the important things, while Peter remained unusually quiet. At one point, I noticed an official-looking letter on the kitchen counter, partially hidden under a magazine. The county seal was visible at the top. A reminder notice for the property taxes, I suspected. Peter caught me looking and quickly moved the magazine to cover it completely. Thanks for helping Ethan, he said stiffly. We appreciate you making the time. There was a question in his eyes, an uncertainty I'd never seen before. For the first time, Peter was looking at me not as the ever-reliable maternal safety net, but as someone whose actions he couldn't predict or control. You're welcome, I replied evenly. He's doing wonderful work. As I prepared to leave at 1 o'clock, Ethan hugged me tightly. Can I come visit you sometime, Grandma? See your apartment? Felt Rebecca stiffen beside us. I had never invited Ethan to my apartment before. It had always been assumed that family gatherings happened in their space, not mine. I'd love that, I told him. Maybe next weekend? We could bake cookies for Christmas. Cool, he exclaimed. As I drove home, I realized something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in years, I had entered and left their house entirely on my own terms. That evening, dressed in a new blue sweater I'd bought myself as an early Christmas gift, I met Walter and 3 others from our painting class for dinner. We talked and laughed for hours, sharing stories and opinions. Not once did I check my phone. Not once did I feel guilty for enjoying myself. I was awake, truly awake, for the first time in decades. Mid-December arrived with twinkling lights and holiday music everywhere. My small apartment had never looked more festive. A tabletop tree, adorned with ornaments I'd collected over the years, a poinsettia brightening the coffee table, and strings of lights framing my windows. For the first time, I had decorated entirely for myself, not to impress visitors or create a perfect family backdrop. I hadn't heard much from Peter or Rebecca since helping Ethan with his project. Our communications had become strictly functional. Brief, texts about when Ethan would visit, polite but distant. The undercurrent of tension was palpable, though unspoken. This morning I had received a formal Christmas dinner invitation from Rebecca, an actual paper card delivered by mail rather than the usual casual text. The formality felt strange, almost cold. The card specified dinner would be served at 6 p.m. on Christmas Day, with a handwritten note, "We hope you can make it for the specified time." The phrasing, "the specified time," spoke volumes. This wasn't an invitation to spend Christmas with family, it was an appointment slot. My phone rang, displaying Judith's name. "Have you decided?" she asked without preamble. Judith had invited me to join her Christmas Eve dinner cruise, a 3-hour evening on Lake Washington with festive food, music, and dancing. It would mean not being available for any Christmas Eve activities at Peter and Rebecca's. "I'm going," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I sent my payment this morning." "Good for you. Walter's coming too, you know. He mentioned hoping to see you there." I felt a flutter in my chest that I hadn't experienced in years. Walter and I had been spending more time together. Coffee after painting class, occasional phone calls to discuss books we were reading. Nothing romantic exactly, but a deepening friendship that had begun to matter more than I had expected. "That will be nice," I said, trying to sound casual. "Nice," she says. Judith laughed. "Martha Jenkins, you're blushing through the phone." Later that afternoon, as I was wrapping a gift for Ethan, art supplies I thought he might enjoy, my phone chimed with a text from Peter. "Mom, Rebecca wants to know if you're coming for Christmas Eve too. She's planning a special breakfast for Christmas morning." I stared at the text, reading between the lines. They were testing me, seeing if I would fall back into old patterns, making myself completely available during the holidays. I typed carefully, "I have plans Christmas Eve, a dinner cruise with friends, but I look forward to joining you for Christmas dinner as per the invitation." His response came quickly. "Friends. Again? Mom, it's Christmas Eve. Family should be together. Family should be together." The same family that had told me I would ruin the holiday as always now expected me to prioritize them over my own plans. I took a deep breath and replied, "I'll see you on Christmas Day, Peter. Give my love to Ethan." My phone rang almost instantly. "Rebecca. Martha," she began, her voice honey-sweet in that way that always preceded something manipulative. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. We assumed you'd want to spend the entire Christmas holiday with family. Ethan is expecting you. I received your invitation for Christmas dinner," I replied calmly. "I'll be there. But what about Christmas Eve and Christmas morning? Our family. Traditions? The traditions that just a month ago I would ruin by my presence. I've made other commitments for Christmas Eve," I said. "I'm sorry if that's disappointing, but my plans are set." A heavy sigh. "Martha, I think you're being rather selfish. Ethan will be devastated." The word hit like a slap. Selfish. After decades of putting everyone else first, after emptying my savings account to support them, after rearranging my life around their needs, I was selfish for claiming one Christmas Eve for myself. "Please tell Ethan I'll see him on Christmas Day and that I have a special gift for him," I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside me. "And Rebecca, I'm not being selfish. I'm finally taking care of myself. There's a difference." I ended the call before she could respond. The week before Christmas passed in a blur of activity. My painting class held a small exhibition where we displayed our work. My still life of apples had evolved into a surprisingly decent painting of a winter landscape. Walter had brought champagne to celebrate our progress, and the group had toasted each other's achievements with genuine warmth. I visited downtown to see the holiday decorations, something I hadn't done in years because Rebecca always insisted on hosting multiple pre-Christmas events that required my help. I baked cookies in my apartment, sending some to neighbors and keeping plenty for myself. I wrapped gifts for Ethan, for Judith, for Walter, and even a small one for Peter, a framed photo of him and Henry from a fishing trip when Peter was 12. On December 23rd, I received another text from Peter. Final property tax notice came today. Says payment is overdue. Is this still your plan, Mom? I had expected this. The county sent multiple notices before taking action. Yes, Peter, as I told you before, I won't be paying the property taxes anymore. Do you understand what this means? If they're not paid, there are serious consequences. I'm aware of how property taxes work, I replied. You've had nearly 2 months to prepare for this. The bill isn't unexpected. He didn't respond. Christmas Eve arrived crisp and clear. I dressed carefully in a burgundy dress I'd bought myself, another first, and a pearl necklace Henry had given me for our 25th anniversary. The dinner cruise wasn't formal, but I wanted to look nice. For myself, and maybe a little for Walter too. As I was applying lipstick, my phone rang. Peter again. Mom, I need to talk to you about the tax situation. It's urgent. I'm just heading out, Peter. We've already discussed this. But you don't understand. We can't cover it right now. We've had some unexpected expenses, and with Christmas, I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I genuinely was. I took no pleasure in their financial difficulties. But I've been clear about this for weeks now. Can't you at least help with part of it? Just this one last time? I closed my eyes briefly. The plaintive tone in his voice tugged at my heart, the mother in me wanting to rescue, to fix, to make it all better. But I had been down this road too many times. No, Peter, I can't. You and Rebecca need to handle your own finances now. This is really how you want to spend Christmas? Punishing your family? I'm not punishing anyone, I said firmly. I'm taking care of myself after years of taking care of everyone else. I'll see you tomorrow for dinner. I hung up, gathered my purse and coat, and headed out to meet Judith for our Christmas Eve celebration. The cruise was magical. Lake Washington sparkled with the reflected lights of shoreline homes. The boat was decked in evergreens and twinkling lights, and a small band played holiday classics. Judith and I were seated at a table with Walter and another gentleman from our painting class. The conversation flowed easily. The food was delicious, and for 3 wonderful hours, I didn't think about property taxes or family tensions or years of unappreciated sacrifice. Walter asked me to dance during White Christmas, his hand gentle at my waist as we swayed to the music. For a moment, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the window glass, a handsome silver-haired man and a woman with a genuine smile that reached her eyes. I barely recognized myself. Happy? Walter asked softly. Yes, I realized with something like wonder. I really am. Back at my apartment later that night, I kicked off my shoes and made a cup of tea, still humming White Christmas under my breath. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Peter and 1 from Rebecca, but no voicemails. Whatever emergency they were manufacturing could wait until tomorrow. I didn't know it then, but at that very moment, as I sipped my tea contentedly in my festive apartment, Peter and Rebecca were opening a certified letter that had been delivered that afternoon. A foreclosure notice. The first step in a process that could eventually lead to losing their home if the delinquent taxes remained unpaid. My Christmas present to myself hadn't been the new dress or the dinner cruise. It had been my freedom. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight reflecting off the fresh snow that had fallen overnight. I took my time getting ready, savoring a leisurely breakfast and calling Judith to thank her again for the wonderful evening. Around noon, I carefully packed the gifts I'd prepared into the car and began the drive to Peter and Rebecca's house, arriving precisely at the specified time of 6 p.m. The moment I pulled into the driveway, I sensed something was different. The usual Christmas lights adorned the house, but the curtains were drawn, and only one car, Peter's, sat in the driveway. Rebecca's was nowhere to be seen. Peter opened the door before I could knock. His face was drawn, eyes rimmed with red as if he hadn't slept. No Christmas sweater, no forced cheer, just my son looking more vulnerable than I had seen him in years. Merry Christmas, I said, holding out the gift bag. You knew, he said flatly. You knew exactly what would happen. I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. I knew there would be consequences if you didn't pay your taxes. Yes. The house was oddly quiet. Where are Rebecca and Ethan? Rebecca took Ethan to her parents. They flew in from Phoenix this morning. He closed the door behind me. After we got the foreclosure notice yesterday. So that was why they had called so insistently, not to wish me a Merry Christmas after all. I see. I set the gift bag on the entryway table. And she left you here alone on Christmas? A bitter laugh escaped him. To deal with you. The words stung, but I kept my composure. Would you like to sit down and talk about this like adults? He led me to the living room, where a half-decorated Christmas tree stood in the corner. Presents were piled beneath it, but the scene lacked the usual festive perfection Rebecca insisted upon. A single opened envelope lay on the coffee table, the foreclosure notice, I presumed. You've put us in an impossible position, Peter began, his voice tight with anger. They're threatening to take our home. Not immediately, I replied calmly. Foreclosure is a lengthy process. You have time to figure this out. Figure what out? How to come up with nearly $7,000 we don't have? He ran a hand through his hair. Why are you doing this, Mom? Is it really all because of what Rebecca said at brunch? I took a seat on the couch, smoothing my skirt. This isn't revenge, Peter. This is me finally respecting myself enough to stop enabling behavior that's been unhealthy for all of us. Unhealthy? We're family. Families help each other. Yes, they do, I agreed. But help should go both ways. For years, I've given and given. Financially, emotionally, practically, while being treated as an afterthought or an inconvenience. That's not healthy for any of us. Peter stared at me, and I could almost see the wheels turning as he processed my words. I've paid your property taxes for 5 years, I continued. Before that, I gave you $175,000 from the sale of my house. I've covered Ethan's activities, paid for family vacations, and been available whenever you needed a babysitter or an extra pair of hands. And in return, I've been gradually pushed to the margins of this family. That's not true, he protested. But weakly, isn't it? When was the last time you asked how I was doing? Really asked and listened to the answer? When was the last time Rebecca treated me with genuine respect? When was the last time you defended me when she made one of her cutting remarks? Peter fell silent, his gaze dropping to his hands. I love you, Peter. I love Ethan. I even want to love Rebecca, though she makes it very difficult sometimes. But love doesn't mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean emptying my bank account while being told I ruin holidays. She shouldn't have said that, he admitted quietly. No, she shouldn't have. But you shouldn't have sat there silently either. Looked up sharply. So this is about punishing me. This is about me finally standing up for myself, I corrected him. And yes, that means you and Rebecca will need to stand on your own feet financially. It means I won't drop everything whenever you call. It means I expect to be treated with respect. And if we lose the house, what then? Then you'll find another place to live, one you can actually afford. I leaned forward. Peter, you make a good salary. Rebecca has her business. You take vacations to Cabo and buy expensive electronics. The only reason you're in this position is because you've been living beyond your means, counting on me to fill the gaps. He was quiet for a long moment. I didn't realize, he finally said, how much you were covering. Rebecca handles most of the finances. Well, now you know. Peter stood and walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered yard. I don't know how to fix this. You start by paying your own bills, I said simply, and by treating me like a person with value, not just a resource to be used. He turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. The apology, unexpected and seemingly genuine, loosened something tight in my chest. Thank you. What happens now? He asked. Now, I said, rising to my feet. I suggest you call your wife and son and tell them to come home for Christmas dinner. I brought pie. 3 months later, I sat in my living room, my new living room, in a cozy condominium I had purchased for myself. The property taxes on Peter and Rebecca's house had eventually been paid, though they'd had to take out a loan to cover them. They had also, with reluctant guidance from a financial advisor, created a realistic budget that didn't include my subsidies. Our relationship was different now, more balanced, more honest. Peter called regularly, not to ask for favors, but to check in. Ethan spent 1 weekend a month with me in my new place. Rebecca remained cool, but the cutting remarks had ceased. As I arranged fresh flowers in a vase, a gift from Walter, who had taken me to dinner twice now, I felt a contentment I hadn't known in years. I wasn't just an invisible support beam anymore. I was the architect of my own life.